Good evening. Before I get started with the presentation, I certainly want to give my thanks to Sierra Club and Eco Action of Penn State and all the other co-sponsors of this event. And I certainly want to thank all of you for taking time out on a Tuesday evening of a lovely spring day to spend time with each other and with me in a beautiful auditorium. And I thank you very much for Penn State welcome. Before I get started in my talks, I usually try to get to know the audience a little better. You know, I've spent all my career being a professor at Cornell, and I've learned my lesson about trying to know who I'm trying to instruct, and I am basically here tonight to teach you things, have you leave here knowing things that you didn't come here knowing. But I've been puzzled about why, and you should be puzzled, why should a guy from New York and from a Cornell University come to Pennsylvania and Penn State University to talk to people from this area? I suspect you're wondering that. I'm wondering it too. So perhaps I could be accused of, pardon the pun, carrying coal to Newcastle. I'm not sure you all got that. But of all the things I'd like to be carrying right now, coal would not be one of them. But no, it's probably not that. Maybe another apt idiom is I'm dumb enough to stick my head in the mouth of the lion. And you're right, this is not the right kind of lion, but I couldn't find anywhere on the web a Nittany lion to stick my head into. That's how I feel right now. So I hope over the next few minutes I can overcome my anxieties and my knee knocking and fear that when I leave here I'm going to find all my tires slashed and get about to doing what we came here tonight, which is to inform each other. And I do hope that as the evening proceeds and we get into Q&A, that I learn at least as much from you as hopefully you'll learn from me. So I always struggle to make sure that when I'm giving an informal education event like this, that I never do the same talk twice. And it's really easy to revise my talk because the rate at which things are changing with the technology, with the regulatory response to the technology, with the political response to the technology, to update and modify my talk. So hopefully those of you who have seen or heard my talks before won't see very much of what you've seen or heard before. You'll see new stuff. And I always struggle with a motif. How can I best encapsulate what I'm trying to get across in a way that is educational, informative, but also at least somewhat entertaining? So I chose a motif tonight of mythology, hence the title of my talk, Myths and Realities, because it turns out, as you well know, that myths play a very important role in American culture and human culture for that matter. A myth is a story that humans tell to other humans, sometimes orally, sometimes in writing. And the kernel of every myth is always truth. There's always a seed of truth in every myth. No matter how outlandish it becomes, no matter how Disney-like it becomes, way down deep inside there's a myth, there's a seed of truth. So I'm going to begin, before getting into what I call some big myths with regard to unconventional gas development and shale formations, by quickly dismissing some of the mini-myths. So I'm going to very quickly go through a few slides here, each of which focuses on what I call a mini-myth, not because it's unimportant as a myth, not because it is not exactly a myth, that there's an element of truth to it, but it's been embellished to be larger than what it is. Therefore, in total, it's probably not mostly true. But I don't have time to go through 7 or 8 myths tonight. I picked the 4 that I think are most important in this time and this place. So the 4 that I'm going to get to in a minute all will help me and help you understand how to frame this entire issue. All of the politics, economic, sociology, environment, and health effects of unconventional gas development. How do you capture that whole problem with a single framework? And I was struck when I read this quote recently by a very prominent Republican environmentalist. You do have a sense of humor as a group, right? Okay, just checking. That he said it very well. One possible framework for the entire discussion on unconventional gas development is you have a natural resource that perhaps should be developed, but it should be developed in a way that preserves the future for our as yet unborn children and grandchildren and does not unduly harm us present humans. But I'm going to go beyond that and say that the real framework for everything I'm going to talk about tonight, and which will support my debunking of the myths, is that we didn't do a good job in the U.S., we meaning citizens of the United States, of making sure that we had the proper regulatory, legal, and strategic energy plan in place before engaging in what I call a corporate business plan. So here's the question as we proceed tonight. It's the question I'm sure you've all asked yourselves before. Is what we're seeing happening in your state, and so far not in my state, the execution of a corporate business plan done before adequate state or national strategic planning for energy resource development and energy resource change, and before there was proper regulatory and enforcement vehicles in place to make sure, as our prominent Republican environmentalists said, that we're extracting the resource without killing anybody now or threatening the lives of people in the future? That's the framework. It's a question. I don't claim to have the entire answer, but I claim to give you some insight and some information, some data, some facts tonight that will help you arrive at a rational way of answering that question for yourselves. So, first, some mini-myths. Remember, an element of a myth is a bit of truth, and then it's embellished, usually for dramatic effect, or for ideological effect, or for political persuasion effect, or to convince somebody that they're going to benefit from something which maybe they won't benefit from. So one of the myths is you should never worry about mistakenly stimulating an abandoned gas well when you're fracking another one. Mini myth. I'm only going to show you one slide. You do see here that here is the frack job's happening over here, and you'll notice that there is whatever. Okay, another mini myth. Fracks and shales stay in zone. How many people understand what that means? Raise your hand. Not many. So in the oil and gas industry, the zone is the pay zone, the area where your resource is. In this case, the Marcellus Shale. That's where the pay zone is. That's where the gas is. And when you're doing the fracking, expending all that money, all that effort, all that energy, pumping all that fluid down there, all you're trying to do is stimulate the pay zone. You really don't want to expend all that energy, time, and money fracking rock where there ain't no gas. So one of the objectives in designing and executing a frack job is to make sure the fracks stay in zone. And one of the mini myths is, don't worry about it, the fracks stay in zone. There's no possibility of frack height growth into rock formations above or below the pay zone. So that's the myth. Here's the data directly from the oil and gas industry. And by the way, at every opportunity I have tonight, I will show you data produced by the oil and gas industry, not by some lowly professor at Cornell or some even lowlier professor at Duke. Your sense of humor is coming on. More about Duke later tonight. Yeah. So let me explain this data very quickly, because this is a mini myth. We can quickly dispense with it. A horizontal axis is the accumulative number of frack stages that have been performed in a number of wells drilled in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio in the Marcellus Formation. So you can think of the horizontal axis of here is a stage that was performed down at 9,000 feet, and over here is a stage that was performed at 5,000 feet, and in between are hundreds and hundreds of frack stages from dozens of wells, which had been instrumented using the best available technology, microseismic technology, to try to detect, using microseismic information, how high the fracks went. Now, how many people here can tell me how thick, on average, the Marcellus Shale Formation is? 1 foot, 10 foot, or 100 feet? Pick a number, 1, 10, or 100. More or less 100. Could be 200, could be 250, sometimes it's 50, sometimes but it's not 1,000 feet thick. If it were, they'd be drilling on my property. Okay, so here's the data, and it shows, this is the blue line I'm asking you to look at, this is the detected height of the highest frack from each of those stages. And I purposely put in these red lines to indicate that in some cases the fracs had grown 1,800 feet, 1,500 feet, 1,200 feet, 1,000 feet above the level of the production casing. In other words, the fracs had grown 5, 6, 7 times the height of the thickness. Industry data. What's the implication to this? Well, there are a couple of implications that demand science to investigate. This is data. Data should be turned into information. What does this mean? Could this have partially explained where the water goes? It doesn't come back? Could it possibly explain how methane might be migrating upwards through rock formations that have been fractured higher than we thought they were? Could it mean that these very large excursions, 1,800 feet, 1,500 feet, are occurring on pre-existing fault systems? And if so, what does that imply? These are science questions that demand answers. But the myth is that fracs stay in zone. In fact, they don't. Another mini myth. In Pennsylvania, operators are recycling up to 90% of their flowback waste. Oh, give me a break. Okay, so you know that starting in 2009, companies were, all operators in Pennsylvania were required to start reporting all production, both gas and waste, from their wells in Pennsylvania. And during the first 12-month period, which began July 1, 2009, ended June 30, 2010, the actual recycling rate across the industry was 20%. Okay? So we were told by the industry, just wait, we're getting better. We're learning how to do it right. We're inventing new technologies as we go along. This is technology come lately. When we got to Pennsylvania, we'd never heard of the word recycling. But now we're inventing it, and we're moving very quickly so that in the second 6-month period, initially the report was that 60% had been recycled, and then, of course, as you well know, somebody discovered that a barrel is not equal to a gallon. At least 2 people made basic math errors, and it turned out that the most recent improvement was from 20% to 38%. So where's the truth here? The truth is that a few companies are recycling up to 90% of some of their waste on some of their wells. That's true, and that's good. But that's a far cry from saying all 74 operators currently producing or drilling or fracking in Marcellus and Pennsylvania are, as a unit, as an industry representation, all recycling all of their fluids from all their wells at the rate of 90% or greater. All right, those are the mini myths. But now I got you warmed up, so you should be expecting a little more detail, a little more depth on the maxi myths, the ones that I think for right now, tonight, my being with you are more important. And here they are, and we're going to spend the rest of my 40 minutes or so talking about each of these. So I'll read them to you now, and then we'll get into depth on each one of them. Big myth number 1, fracking is a 60-year-old well-proven technology. True or false? It's true. Fracking is a 60-year-old well-proven technology. We'll find out why that truth has evolved into myth in a few minutes. True or false? Gas migration from faulty wells is a rare phenomenon. It's true. Next, the use of multi-well pads reduces surface impact. True or false? By now, you should be saying true, Professor. Hey, I was told that, like in New York, everybody in Pennsylvania is above average intelligence, so please start acting it. Okay, and the last one, natural gas is a clean fossil fuel. True or false? Here we go. Oh boy, are you ready?